legends, let's review UFC Seattle, okay? Now, we got some new faces on the channel this week. We got some new subscribers, so I'll just bring everyone up to speed on how I do my recaps. You know, usually when you go over MMA YouTube, everyone's going through every single fight on the card, sort of recapping it and reviewing it like maybe you hadn't watched it. I like to do something different. I like to assume that, yeah, you did watch the card, and I'm just giving my general takes and my takeaways on the card overall, not every single fight, okay? Because I am just an MMA fan. This is just a MMA channel, MMA fan channel experience. Like, I'm just putting my fandom out there on the internet. You know, I'm not pretending to be some sort of MMA expert. I'm just a bloke that likes to watch the sport. And like in my day-to-day life, there's no one to talk to about it. There's no one to talk to about it at all. If you go to a building site and mention MMA, if you're lucky, someone might say, oh yeah, that Conor McGregor guy, bloody love that bloke. So having said that, that's why I don't go through every single fight on the card, just some of my big takeaways of it. Now, my big takeaway from UFC Seattle overall is, what a card. What a card. Phenomenal. Overall, phenomenal card. How lucky are we right now in UFC MMA 2025? MMA is so goddamn good right now. I don't know how many people remember, you know, this time last year, we were around that UFC 300 slump where everything just seemed to be getting stacked onto UFC 300, and every single week, the UFC was just shitting out hot turds of paste all over the apex. Every single week just seemed to be fat blob heavyweights and not interesting WMMA fights. And I don't know, man, ever since the last quarter of last year, ever since we went to China last year, we have just been getting phenomenally fun cards again and again and again. And even though UFC 312 on paper wasn't that good, for me watching it, it was still a very fun card to sit down and watch. Like, plus all the announcements that we just got last week, UFC in 2025 is going great, and people over at Bellator PFL are like jumping ship, begging to get on board with the UFC. Everything's looking up for the UFC. With Seattle being great, you know, being a MMA content creator, right? People will often ask me, what fights will you show someone, show a casual, show someone new to introduce them to the sport? You know, there's the classic answers like Dustin Poirier and Dan Hooker. I think there's a new answer. Just put this card on. Like the main card, it goes for about 2.5 hours, starts off with sloppy light heavyweights, then it gets into a lot of fun and interesting fights, and then ends with a controversial main event with something a little bit different happening. It'll go for about 2.5 hours if you skip through the ads on Fight Pass. Just put this, make some food, order some pizza, get some beers, put this card on. If they don't like it by the end of this card, they'll probably never like MMA. There's something for everyone on this card. And it's so strange here, like what made last night so good? Why did last night seem just so phenomenal and so fun? When you really look at the ingredients of what made last night special, it's kind of what we have been talking about for years. Yeah? UFC Seattle. It was just at a simple arena somewhere in America. Not at a super overblown atmosphere like the Sphere in Las Vegas or the Intuit Dome. It was just a normal city in a normal arena. And there was no WMMA to slow the card down. And there were no fat heavyweights either. Just the core competitive divisions up and down the card. And even though the fights weren't at the highest level, you know, let's look at the one that kicked off the main card, Alonzo Menifield. His opponent steps in on short notice. Even though we're not looking at the highest level of MMA imaginable, because we're in the competitive divisions, it is still just generally fun. And sometimes unskilled MMA is still fun MMA. So even though you don't have the most important divisionally shifting fights happening all over the card, you've still got decent fun fights happening because you're throwing away all the trash. So this goes to prove that delete all of WMMA from the UFC. So just send them all to Invicta. Look, if you like WMMA, that's great, you know, but if you like WMMA, let's have a sport that's just for WMMA. Feel free to go and watch it over there. And then take the entire heavyweight division and just give it to Ryzen. You know, where you can do soccer stomps and just let them go nuts with the old school pride rules. Just give the entire heavyweight roster to Ryzen. They'll probably earn more because that market tends to love the big overblown dudes more anyway, okay? And do not look me in the eyes and tell me that if we have Cage Warriors, Octagon in Europe, Eternal, LFA, with With all the regional scenes, do not tell me that there isn't enough talent in the world to have deep divisions from flyweight all the way up to light heavyweight in the UFC. We followed a very simple ingredient list last night, and it played massive dividends into a super fun card. A crowded arena, no WMMA, no fat heavyweights slowing the card down, cinema. Right, so they're my general takeaways so far. What are some specific fights that I wanted to talk about? Let's talk specifics. Ricky Simón versus Jared Basharat. That's one that I really wanted to talk about. Why I really like Ricky Simón as a fan coming up, but I feel like he never really lived up to his full potential. In fact, I was worried that we were seeing a little bit of a Ricky Simón slump. And then on the other side of it, Javid Basharat. The Basharat brothers, I don't know if, hate isn't the right word, but I feel like they've been overglazed, the Basharats. I feel like they have more popularity and more hype than they should. Every single time I have watched one of the Basharats fight, I have felt no power on their punches. There's no pop. They seem to be decision merchants to me. They've got that karate style, point combat style, where you look at the end of the fight and they're just sort of pointing their way to a win. And to see one of them get slept after all this time, good God, what a sleeping. The way that Jared's eyes were rolling through the back of his skull, you could tell that he was seeing the code of the Matrix all around us. You know, he saw those gray alien programmers. They were speaking to him on a higher plane of existence, trying to figure out how to reconnect him to our realm as quickly as possible. It was insane to watch. Oh my God, he literally woke up and said, "Where am I? What happened?" And his eyes are still rolling around like mad. And as for Ricky Simón, sick, great to see. So happy to see him back. Honestly, keep the hair blonde, keep the Super Saiyan hair, press on with it, Ricky. What are some other highlights? I know one that I'm going to cop flack for is Jan Silva versus Melsik, you know, because I picked Melsik, you know, I didn't pick Jan Silva, Gene Silva. And I'll tell you why, because we've seen a lot of Gene Silva where he's very playful in the octagon. We all know this, but he's doing a lot of left and right movement. He's bouncing around left and right and he's keeping his hands down low. And I figured eventually a good clean striker that isn't, you know, Drew Dober, who fights with a Michael Chandler-esque style. I figured a good, clean, basic striker with basic boxing is eventually going to catch him while he's moving left and right and his hands are down, and he's going to fucking sleep him. Because it's always the ones that you don't see coming, always while you're sort of moving into them, that get you. Silva was sort of putting together that textbook play, and I figured Melsik, he's a good, clean striker. This will be the one. Why not? Let's go with the underdog here. I was wrong, and that's okay. That happens sometimes. I was wrong. And not only was I wrong, but Gene Silva's team, the Fighting Nerds, seem to have picked up on what us Gene Silva non-believers picked up on. Because it was very forward and back movement. Still had the hands down, but he was maintaining the range far more beautifully. And when he was moving left and right, he was doing it to stay right in the center of Melsik. It was actually Melsik who was dancing around, and Silva would be the one to recenter and reposition himself. It was beautiful to see. And then he decided, bang, it's over. Melsik was sort of looking up, like you could tell that he still had his wits about him. And the ref was like, we're going to stand him back up, we're going to finish it, because this guy isn't completely out cold. So Silva was like, I'll finish him. And the ref's like, well, finish him, or maybe he'll get up, maybe he'll go for a single leg, who knows, let's see what happens here. And Silva starts to elbow him to the side of the body to not hurt him. There's fighter IQ on one end, you know, Chandler, duh. And then there's the Fighting Nerds. There is a spectrum of fight IQ going on here that I am loving watching, loving it. Rob Font versus Matsumoto. Let's talk about that one as well, because I picked Rob Font, and this was a real Rob Font are you cooked or not fight. Yeah, this was one of those fights in a fighter's career. Are you cooked, Rob Font? And Rob Font seemed to have known this going into the fight, you know? Because he fought like his career mattered to him. God, did he put up a fight. It was a put up or shut up moment for Rob Font, and he followed through amazingly. Now, was he dirty at the start of the fight? Yes. Did he cheat throughout the fight? Also, yes, he grabbed the fence. But it shows you that he cares about his career, you know? He doesn't want to be kicked out of the UFC. He wants to keep fighting. And one of the things I often talk about on the channel is what about the fight in the fighter? And you know, when you're setting up your parlays or when you're betting in the future, when you see Rob Font up on the next up on the ballot, you know Rob Font is at least gonna fucking try. He's gonna cheat. He's gonna dog his way through it. He's gonna do whatever he can. At least he's gonna fucking try. He has picked the Chris Weidman exit plan, where it's gonna be dirty, but god damn it, I'm gonna try and get a win. And I kind of, as long as we know, I can respect it. Fluffy versus Alan. When I saw the blonde hair, I was worried. I'm not gonna lie, there is something to blonde hair in the cage that gives you 10 plus aura points, which seem to add power to your fists. I was very worried. I don't like Brendan Allen. As a fan of the sport, I don't like him. I just think, I find him, he irks me. I find him annoying, and I really like Fluffy. So I was on the edge of my seat for this entire one. Grappling is fun when people are trying to be dominant and hurt the other opponent. There is a difference between Fluffy, Moicano, and wet blanket wrestlers. There is a big difference. When we, the MMA community, bitch and moan about boring Marab Batista grappling, and some people out there on Twitter and Instagram try and sound like hardcores, MMA fans whinging that they're using MMA. Shut up. Shut the fuck up. We want entertainment. We don't mind grappling when it's entertaining. And Fluffy is entertaining grappling. As much as I love Fluffy, and as much as I've been on the bandwagon of pushing him forward in the division, we, I feel, have now reached that part of the rankings where skill meets physicality, and Fluffy no longer will have the physicality to push forward. Jared Cannonier fucks him up. Just straight up. Everyone above Jared Cannonier fucks him up. They're too big. Whitaker fucks him up. Everyone is just too big for Fluffy at this point. What do you do? He's clearly skilled enough to be here. Is he becoming that new Neil Magny, Wonder Boy, Holloway, like that killer? How do you compare Neil Magny to Holloway, Dougie? What have you just said? You know, every division has got that bloke in the rankings where it's like, shit, that's a hard fight. Are you going to be a top 5, top 7 fighter? How are you going to get through this guy? I feel like that's where Fluffy is. I feel like Fluffy's that guy. You know what I mean? Right, let's get to the main event. Cejudo versus Yadong. Yadong, okay. Let's center ourselves here. Cejudo versus Yadong. I got notes, hang on. Okay. Was Henry Cejudo's eye hurt? Yes. Yes, it was. Was it hurt to the point where he could not continue to fight? I do not believe so. What I think went down is that Henry Cejudo tried to Aljamain Sterling his way to a win. He tried to pull an Aljo, as we like to say, in the back. You know, it was the craftiest of vet moves I've ever seen. I had the first 2 rounds going to Henry Cejudo. Very close. Round 2 and round 3 could have gone either way, but I had, in fact, round 1 could have gone either way. Very close. But I had the first 2 rounds going to Henry Cejudo. It is damage-based scoring. The criteria says you take the shot with the most impact over the cumulative damage. At the end of the second, Cejudo pops Song's nose, blood squirts everywhere. He's rocked at the very end of the second round to close off the round. To me, by my reading of the rules of this sport that we are watching, that is enough to give Cejudo the second round. Yadong wins the third. Yadong wins the third. It feels like Yadong is taking over. The age is getting to Cejudo. Yadong's pace is staying. Now, we go to the eye poke. We go to the full 5 minutes waiting time. Cejudo, the craftiest of crafty vets, his eye is in pain, yet he is still looking around, talking to the ref, talking to the doctor. He's saying very loudly, I can't see, I just need time, yet he's interacting with the world around him fine. He then, because his eye hurts, sits down. Sits down and looks around at the crowd and starts bantering with them, essentially, with open hands. I think the crafty vet Cejudo, who does his little war rooms, thinks he's up 2 rounds and figures, if we can get this to go over the third, we're on here, boys. And you can see when they're reading out the judge's scorecard, Cejudo is devastated that the scoring didn't go his way. I think he was trying to sneaky steal a win. That is not to say that his eye wasn't in pain. I'm sure his eye is in pain. But I'm also sure that when you get kicked in the ribs, you're in pain for quite a bit. I'm also sure that Yadong's nose was stinging him quite a bit, considering how Cejudo had popped it up. I'm also sure if you get hit in the orbital, that stings quite... You know, fighters are in pain throughout a 25-minute fight. His eye was hurt. He also did some maths. Cejudo absolutely did some maths. Did he quit? I don't know if he quit. I think He was going for a win in the most Cejudo gamer way possible. Remember, this is Henry Cejudo, who, while he was on the way to be considered one of the greatest combat sport athletes of all time, weird sentence, but you know what I mean. Like, he had won an Olympic medal, he was a double champ, he was defending, look at the names on his resume. He just decides to just walk away and retire to somehow Khabib his way back into a bigger offer. Like, you know how Dana wants to throw a ton of money at Khabib to get Conor Khabib too? He thought something like that was going to happen to himself with his retirement. So Cejudo's a gamer, and he's like, well, I lost the first gamble, but fuck it, back to the casino. Let's see if I'll win this gamble. And he didn't. Sucks to be you, Henry. And now Dana fucking hates him. They're asking him about rematches at the post-fight press conference, and Dana White is just like, you want to fucking see that fight? Like, it's just a dude. Dana hates you now. The crowd hate you. Oh, so Henry, don't gamble, boys, because Henry gamble. Imagine what his DraftKings looks like. Anyway, that was that. UFC Seattle. Oh, this video has gone way too long. UFC Seattle. Great fight night. Great fight night. If this is your first time here and you've watched all the way to the end, welcome. My name's Dougie. I try and make an MMA video every day of the week, Monday through Friday. Let me know your thoughts on UFC Seattle down there. Do you think Cejudo's eye was so genuinely hurt he couldn't continue, or do you think he was gaming the system a little bit? Let me know about that down there in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like. And if you're one of the paying members of the channel, thank you so much. Enjoy the back-end content. There's plenty there for you, and your names are up on the next slide as a thank you. Have a great week. I'll see you all in the next one.